Welcome to the Value Builder Podcast, where we focus on real estate with a value-add mindset. Real strategies, real operators, real outcomes. Let's dive in.
Hey, Value Builder community. Today I have John Casmon, who perfectly shows how to transfer skills to build massive value. Now, John is multifamily space, but in the past, he spent 15 years in corporate marketing for General Motors, Nike, Coors Light, and he took those exact skills to build $145 million real estate empire through his company, Casmon Capital Group. He also hosts a multifamily insights podcast with over 500 episodes. Now, John, you've been significant value and you learn how to do that, how to build value in two very different industries, corporate marketing and real estate. So what's the common thread between marketing and corporate, and how do you use those skills to have the success in building value in multifamily real estate?
That's a great question, and it actually took me a long time to figure it out. So I appreciate you having me on and sharing some of these insights along the way. But yeah, to answer that question, really the thread that ties them both together is understanding that this is a people business, and it all comes down to relationships. I think starting out, when I was trying to get into real estate and build up my real estate portfolio, I thought I needed to know everything about real estate, how to do construction, how to manage a property, landlord, tenant laws. I spent a lot of time researching those things and trying to do turns myself, trying to lay tile and trying to figure out how to do these things right to be a real estate investor, to be a handyman type thing. And the truth is, you don't need all those skills. Don't get me wrong. It's important. Someone needs to be able to do these things, but you don't have to be the jack of all trades. There are ways to invest where you can leverage the skills that you've developed and use those transferable skills as opposed to trying to learn a brand new industry from the bottom. And it took me a while to figure that out, but once I did, it allowed us to grow and scale.
Makes sense. So what year was when you jumped ship from corporate to real estate?
Yeah, so that was around 2019. So to give you a little backstory, I started off like many of your listeners with the W-2 job in corporate America. I was doing a thing I enjoyed, which was advertising and marketing. I was, fresh out of school from a few years earlier and starting to build my career. So very early into my career, getting some success, getting some traction. In 2007, I'm working at General Motors. About a year and a half later, we're starting to see some issues with the company's finances. Some of you may remember our CEO went down to Washington, D.C. and had this, just debacle of a situation where they asked him how he got there. He said he flew a private jet, and that was pretty much the end of it at that point. But long story short, company goes into bankruptcy, and I'm looking at a lot of lifers, a lot of my peers, friends that I've gotten to know over the years, and they didn't have a plan B. And I was sitting there asking myself, well, what do you do, man? Do you just keep updating the resume and job hopping, or do you take more control over your life? And I watched people who, they were getting paid really well, but they had to play the game. You had to play the game to rise up the corporate ladder, to change careers, be nice to this guy so you could get a bump. Don't make this person mad. It was just a thing that I couldn't see myself doing for another 20, 30 years. And that's when I turned to real estate. So I started investing with my wife, slowly and small, 2-unit building, 3-unit building. And as we invested, we started to learn, we started to grow, we started to network. And that ultimately led us to start partnering with other people.
Makes sense. So it was gradual. So while you were working corporate, right, you're buying duplexes and floor flats and stuff like that. And then 2019, that's it. That's when you just went full time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wish my story could be linear, right? Where it's like, hey, I was building up my personal portfolio slide, and then one day I woke up and realized I was making way more money in my real estate than it was my job, and said, peace. That's not what happened. It's great when I hear people have that story, because that's how I drew it up. But as you know, life doesn't always go the way you call it. So what happened for us was we were starting to build up our own personal portfolio. I got up to a 13-unit, $1.5 million portfolio. But then that second company I was working at an agency in Chicago now. And one day I get a phone call from my New York office, and they're asking me what's going on. I'm like, what are you talking about? And sure enough, the bank had come in and started seizing assets. So they were taking the copier, the printer, phones, computers, laptops. And I'm like, what? So I called the CEO and I'm like, hey, man, at this point, I'm fairly high up, right? When I was at GM, it was just me. So I was like, oh, this sucks, but I'll find another job. We'll be all right. Now I got 2 kids. I got a wife and I'm watching this happen. And I'm literally going through it like, how did I wind up back in the same position? You know, the whole reason I got into real estate was to provide me with financial freedom, financial flexibility. And I was certainly on the right track, but I was not at my destination. So in that moment, I realized what I was doing was taking me down the right road, but my strategy had a lot of limitations. And the biggest limitation was my own capital. You know, I was a guy who my wife and I would just save our money. Once we had enough money saved, we could go out and buy a property. Well, not only was the capital one of the restraints I had, but the other one was I actually had to manage these assets. And I remember there was a Saturday I was sitting in one of the vacant units. I got quoted $700 to paint it. And I said, I'm not paying you $700. I'll do it myself. So I did it myself. And it was a Saturday, my day off from work. And I got 2 little kids. And instead of spending that Saturday with my kids, you know, at the beach, I spent it indoors watching paint dry, waiting to apply that second coat of paint. And I literally sat there like, is this what you're doing? Like, you got into this for financial freedom, for, you know, more control over your life. At no point did you say, I want to be painting vacant units on a Saturday afternoon. And obviously every business, every dream has to have some level of sacrifice, but it just made me realize there's a different way. And ultimately I ended up coming across a guy who had done a lot of apartment syndications. He was starting to teach others how to do that. And he became my mentor. And I got lucky because, you know, at this time, this person had started really scaling his coaching business. But I was one of his earlier clients and I didn't realize it at the time. But this guy went on to do $1 billion plus in real estate. But at the time I met him, he had only done $7 million worth of real estate. So watching him grow and scale gave me really a first row seat to a different way of playing the game. Whereas I honestly would have just tried to find people to partner with me on my 8 and 12 unit buildings. I didn't know regular people like me could go out and buy 100+ unit buildings. That just wasn't something that was fathomable. So when I saw him doing that, that really changed that trajectory and that mindset and allowed us to go out there and scale and raise capital for these real estate deals.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. So I would like to go a little deeper on this. I think multifamily has probably a very big correlation in any value add commercial real estate. Let's say if I'm thinking industrial or retail, I wrote a few times about what major hats or roles you need to have in value add commercial real estate. So the way I see it is typically you have to have an opportunity. Then there is debt and equity. Then there is construction stabilization. And last one is lease up and / property management. So those 4 hats sometimes could be 5, maybe if there is a longer project, could be asset management and stuff like that. From those, you know, I'm assuming you're driving mostly capital or are you an opportunity deal guy, you know, how many of those hats typically you wear in your deals right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And I think it's a great framing of that question because what you're getting at is there are I don't know anyone who has been successful at scale that does everything when it comes to commercial real estate.
Yeah.
Even someone who owns the property themselves with no investors, they typically have either employees or team members that handle leasing or construction or certain aspects of it. I don't know a one-man shop in this space. So it's important for investors to understand what you are good at. What can you handle yourself? Obviously, you're the leader. You're going to be the CEO. You're going to be the person driving the charge and driving that vision. But you're going to need to supplement that vision with people who can go out there and execute. And you got to have people who are better than you. I learned very early on that the first 2 unit building we bought, there was one day I realized we had hardwood floors throughout because we had peeled up the carpet, and the hardwood floor in the closet was kind of damaged. And I was like, I don't want to repair the hardwood floor in the closet. It's a closet. I'll just lay some vinyl tile over it. I learned very quickly, I do not know how to lay vinyl tile, right? I mean, I was sitting there trying to cut it at 2 a.m, couldn't get it right. I messed up measuring a couple of times and ended up having to rip it all out, right? And it's a waste of my time. It's not my skill set. I'm certain I could learn it and be, sufficient at it. But there are people who do this all day, every day. It's not the best use of my time. So when it comes to the role that I play, it's really understanding what I've done in corporate, right? Which is the vision. It's understanding what success looks like. It's goal setting. It's leading the team. It's communication. It's driving that vision and really working with others and identifying the right key members to bring onto the team. So for me, that comes down to a couple of key areas. So it's acquisitions. It's also going to be capital raising and working with investors, and then hiring and working with either the team that's executing the asset, so the property management team, the construction team, maintenance team, those folks who are going to be involved in the day-to-day upkeep and the day-to-day execution of that asset.
Makes sense. So construction and lease up, for example, you hire someone on your team or you partner another sponsor along, like co-sponsor, so to speak. What is your typical, typical deal structure looks like? I'm just curious. And there's
we
a couple school of thoughts here, right?
Yeah, we've done it both ways, right? I think so. For us, the way we typically look at it, so I'll give you a couple examples, right? We've got a deal in Florence, Kentucky. It's 81 units. I have a business partner on that one. My business partner is more in charge of overseeing the property management team. We typically always work with third-party management. So in that case, she's the one who is overseeing the property management team. But we tag team those calls. There are things that come up where, I'm a little bit more of a people person. She's a little bit more of a process person. So sometimes it needs a different touch or a different voice to make something happen, but we kind of collaborate and kind of align on what needs to happen next. So it really depends, but we are the ones ultimately in charge. I have other deals where I'm a general partner, but I'm not the lead operator. And in that case, that lead operator is making those day-to-day decisions. Typically speaking, I still like to weigh in just because I've done enough investing and I've seen enough things where there may be some value that I can provide that maybe they haven't done or maybe they haven't seen. So usually we are working with bringing other people. When it comes to lease up, so we typically do value add deals. So our properties are typically already 80, 85, 90% occupied when we're buying them. So it's not necessarily a big lease up play as much as it is an efficiency place. We're looking at, where are the current rents? Where can we take them? What are the other income line items that we're getting paid for now? How can we add revenue to the top line? How can we drive the NOI? Are there expenses we can decrease? My role is really coming in and looking at it as a business, right? So this is where that corporate experience comes in. For me, is looking at it as a business and being able to drive more efficiency. Now, for someone else, you got to figure out what your skill set is, right? If you are more hands-on and handy, you may want to come into a deal and be the person that's doing the construction or doing the maintenance or doing the repairs. If you are, coming from the property management standpoint or coming from a realtor standpoint, you may want to be in charge of the leasing because maybe you're excellent at understanding what tenants are looking for. And maybe you want to be in charge of the property management. So it really depends on, I think, your skill set. But if you don't really know and you haven't done this, I think the most important thing is to surround yourself with others who have. That could be through the form of partnerships. That could be through the form of investing passively in a syndication deal or a JV deal. It could be in the form of hiring a coach or a mentor. But the key here is to surround yourself with people who have that experience because that's going to help alleviate some of the growing pains and some of the challenges and obstacles that many new or first-time investors overcome.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's such a great frame for sure. Yeah. And I learned it the same way. I learned that myself that you really have to play your strong hand, and you have to partner up a lot of times with someone who is better at that. I was guilty trying to go with everything in the house, and then it does not get done at the highest level. And of course, there's a one where you're spreading out too much, when there's too many cooks in the kitchen and you can't get online, right? You're probably in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think to your point, man, it's a lot about the framing and the mindset because a lot of us, especially Americans, right, we're taught to do our own work, throughout school, throughout our life and upbringing. You're taught to do your own thing. Like, even if you're at a company, you don't typically talk about salary and what someone else is making, right? Like, there's a lot of competition, but it's almost a silent competition. So you got to do your own work and you got to wait to see who gets promoted. Real estate, especially commercial real estate, is different. Now, if you come from single family real estate investing, that is still more siloed and isolated, right? Because I don't want to compete with you because you might try to take my contract or you might get, my wholesale guy. So they don't share a lot. It's definitely, and it's not enough money. If we buy a house and let's say it's $150,000 house, if we make a $20,000 profit, that's great, but that's not enough to share with 3 or 4 other people, right?
Absolutely.
So you're not seeing as much collaboration in that space. And that's the mindset I think a lot of people have when they think about real estate investing. When you get into commercial, though, you're talking about millions of dollars. You really do have to think of it as a business, because if you've got a property, and I'll use another property, right? We've got a property in Louisville, Kentucky. It's 104 units. It generates about $130,000 to $150,000 in gross revenue each month, right? So well over 1.5, $1.6 million, somewhere in that range, right? You're thinking about now a company that's generating, think that company, right? Not just property, but think about it as a company generating $1.5 million annually. Well, there's no other world where you would expect to generate $1.5 million a year and you're doing it all by yourself, right?
Exactly.
Like, no, you need people. You're going to need employees. You're going to need vendors. You're going to need different folks that are going to help sustain this business, right? And that's the difference in the mentality is you have to think of it as a business. It's generating this much revenue. The reason you can partner, the reason you can share, the reason you can bring on investors is because there's a big enough pie to share. If you got a pie that's $10,000, you can't share that. Like, it's just not enough to share. You're not going to give, 500 here and 1,000 here and 1,500 here. There's just nothing there. So you need scale. And that scale allows us to run it professionally, to use professional property management companies, to use professional lawn care services, to use professional HVAC technicians, to raise capital from retail investors, accredited investors, and folks who are looking to get passive income. We can run it like a professional organization and a professional company because it's generating that kind of revenue. This is a multi-million-dollar asset that we are running. We want to treat it as such. When you've got $150,000 house, you can't treat it like that because there's just not enough revenue coming through.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Now, on the same note, I'm just curious on the housing and duplexes. Do you still have them, or you sold? On my end, I sold them during the COVID, like 2020. I just put everything on the market, and I bought. I bought with that capital in warehouses. In hindsight, that was a great move, but I don't know what I was doing. I'm just curious. You still have housing, or you converting them to apartments?
Yeah, our entire portfolio now is apartments. At a 2-unit, 3-unit, 5, and 8-unit building, we ended up selling those mainly because once I moved to Cincinnati, they became a lot harder to manage than I anticipated. I had connections because I was running the Chicago multifamily club, so I had a lot of friends and connections in the city. But it's just different when you realize, again, when we talk about professionalism, right? When I lived at that property, it was easy just to go outside and shovel the snow. You're in Chicago, so you understand, man. When it snows, it snows. So I could go out and shovel the snow and throw down salt and be fine. I wasn't tracking how much that was costing. But when I moved to Cincinnati, even though I had a buddy who was doing it for me, it was $40 every time it snowed, right? It snowed and he had to come out, shovel, salt it. So it was $40 every time. Well, it adds up, right? You get a snowy winter. I was sitting there like, I didn't make any money this month. Well, why? Because it snowed 5 times. He had to repair this door. He had to do this. And I'm like, okay, these are all the little expenses that add up that most investors miss. And this goes back to that whole thing about passive investing versus active investing. The fallacy that many people fall for is thinking that buying a real estate investment is passive. Unless someone else is truly in charge of the day-to-day operations and they're the ones responsible for the profitability of that asset, it is not passive. And the work we do, we don't necessarily calculate it. We don't calculate the ROI on the time we're investing in it, taking that phone call, writing up the listing and placing that ad out there, showing the property to prospective tenants, signing the lease. Like, we don't track that when it's just you and your own property, right? When you're self-managing, you usually aren't saying, oh, okay, well, hey, I spent 12 hours this month on that, 12 hours times X. Okay, guys, I really only made $2. They're not doing that, right? You just chalk it up to the work, sweat equity. But the truth is, we are investing to get a return, not just on our capital, but on our time. And if you're not tracking your time, you could very easily wind up with a second job, and sometimes a poorly paying second job. And if you're not managing it right, again, you may wake up and like, why am I doing this? I mean, that was my epiphany that day I was painting at my apartment. I was sitting there like, this is like the worst second job I've ever had because I'm my own boss. I'm terrible. I'm cheap. I got to come here and paint on a hot Saturday in July. and I'm not making much money. I
Yeah.
literally would have been better off at that point just saying, you know what? Let me go find a part-time job where I can show up, punch a clock. I'm going to get paid every 2 weeks, right? At that point, someone moved out. That's the worst because now no one's paying me. I got to do all this work to try to get this place ready to be occupied again. And then I've got to work super hard to get that tenant back into the unit. Certainly you build wealth over time, so it's worth it. But most people don't track the time and effort and energy they put into it, and they only look at the numbers. And I think that's a mistake because you're not really tracking that return on your time. You're only tracking kind of your return as an investor. And that's where passive investing becomes really attractive. It's like, well, wait a minute. If I can make even close to what I was making without having to do all that work, it's worth it because I'm not the one who's got to cut the grass. I don't have to deal with these phone calls. I don't have to paint these units. So if you can put your money in someone else's hands, understand the investment, understand who you're investing with. But if you understand that and you can make similar returns, for a lot of investors, it's well worth it because of the time investment.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you touched on that. I'm getting a lot of heat because what I'm talking in my newsletter and sometimes open up that I think real estate is just that fallacy of financial freedom, and I think it is always a milestone where you're at in life, and that freedom it keeps expanding if you're doing the right choices. But there is no one destination. Like people who don't have houses, they think they're gonna be free until they get 100 houses. And when we have 100 houses and you're managing them, it's far beyond the freedom, right? And then people want, apartments, get 1,000 doors. When I get 1,000 doors, it's no longer freedom again, or if they're going to get 1,000,000 square feet. And it just, it's always a process of becoming more and more freer. And I think the way I see it through if you 5-year career of the real estate investor, I think eventually they become the financiers and just money lenders from their own principle. I think that's the highest level of freedom eventually. But as you move through those ladders, it is always a choke point. Choke points actually that you're have a lot of it, but then sacrifice the freedom. So it's always kind of massaging and just adjusting. That's how I see it again, but I just don't agree with that, that the real estate is always passive, as you say, which is not until you get 100 houses, like I say.
It's not, and I think too, when we talk, that word freedom, it's a heavy word because I think there's a lot of different interpretation of it. What I think most real estate investors really mean is flexibility, right? There's a big difference between financial freedom and financial flexibility. Financial freedom means you're good on money. Like you're set for life. There's nothing that you can do, right? And based on lifestyle, that may be fine. But again, if you're curbing the lifestyle you actually want to fit, this, whether it be FIRE, right? This FIRE movement where you're financially independent. Okay, but if that's just having $1 extra from your bills every month, like that's not really a lifestyle, right? If you're just barely over, breaking even. And it really just comes down to the individual. So for me, it's more about flexibility. It's about time flexibility. It's about money flexibility to do the things you want to do, to be with the people you want to be with when you want to be with them. For me personally, like I take great joy in being able to spend time with my kids, to be able to work from home, to be able to take off whenever I need to. I don't have to ask somebody, hey, can I go check on my kids thing? Like, no, I'm just, hey guys, I can't meet this day. You got to move this meeting till tomorrow or later. And I control that. And I think that flexibility is the thing that people want. I can tell you when I was in corporate America, it was way less stressful because I knew I was getting paid no matter what, right? Like I still want to do a great job, but I was getting paid either way. And the flip side of that coin, though, is there were days where I didn't have any control over my time. I remember there was my oldest son had maybe his second or third birthday, and I had to go to a shoot, and I didn't want to go to the shoot, but our team, we had gotten so small coming out of that bankruptcy situation I mentioned to you. And our team was so tiny that no one on the team had experience leading like a television production before. And I've done it for years, and I was like, wow. And they really wanted somebody experienced to go. And I was a, high level director at that point. So they're like, John, you got to go. Oh man. So I didn't want to go. I really wanted to ask the CEO to go, except his son shares the same birthday with my son. So I'm like, I can't ask him to miss his son's birthday so I can make my son's birthday. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So I ended up going to the shoot, right? The entire time I'm on set, I'm just irritated. And I'm not even sure why I'm irritated. I knew I didn't want to be there, but I didn't fully comprehend why and what was going on. And the truth hit me right when the shoot wrapped, because I FaceTimed my son. It was his birthday, so I FaceTimed him. His birthday party was that weekend, so I was there for all that. But I just wasn't there on his actual birthday because I'd be on set. And what I realized is two of my core beliefs, two of my core values of who I believe I am were in direct conflict with each other. And the reason I was so upset is I realized later that I picked the wrong value to stand behind, because I valued being a hard worker, dependable, reliable, trustworthy. If you need something done, call John. He'll take care of it. He'll figure it out. I always prided myself on that, especially in my corporate career. I prided myself on being a stand-up guy who does what he says he's going to do. But I also pride myself on being a great father, a present father, someone who puts his children before everything in the world, someone who would certainly not miss, key milestones. And those two beliefs, core beliefs of who I believe I am, were in direct conflict. And it made me challenge who I was. And in that moment, we always have a choice, right? It's easy to I got to work. I got to work, right? That eliminates the choice. You don't have to work. You can do whatever you want to do. You don't got to do anything, right? You can pick and choose. But we tell ourselves these things because it's easier for us to frame it up and not take accountability and ownership for the decisions we make, and maybe some of the beliefs that we have or the values that we have. And that entire flight, the trip back, I just realized, dude, you say you believe in this, but when faced with those two things in conflict, you chose this. Now, there could have been negative ramifications, right? Like for me missing my son's birthday, nothing came of it, right? My wife talked. We all know, okay, work's important. There was no question, no challenge. My son was 2, right? He didn't care. Hey, Dad, you come back up tomorrow? Okay, great. See you then. But personally, I definitely felt it internally. And I think that's something that when we talk about financial flexibility, again, this is an internal battle that no one else knew about, saw, heard about, thought about, cared about. But when you talk about financial flexibility, I never wanted to put myself in that situation again, where I felt I had to make a choice that I didn't really want to make because I didn't have the power. And regardless of money, just take money to the side, it's now a situation where I can move that date. I need to travel for something. Oh, hey, I'm not going to go that day. Do it here. If it's not a day I can move it, I'm not going, right? You want to be in a position where you have that control, again, to be with the people you want to be with, when you want to be with them, doing the things you love. And obviously we've got to work and do other stuff outside of that, but to have that financial flexibility is key.
Yeah. It reminded me another framework very quickly that was taught to me by Dan Sullivan, right?
Yeah.
It's about freedom, and first we strive to get freedom of money. Once we get it, freedom of money, we realize we don't have freedom of time. Then work on freedom of time. Then once we get freedom of time, then we work on freedom of relationships, because we get entangled in so many responsibilities. Maybe we're not supposed to be there. And then at the tail end, we work on freedom of purpose. So, and that's how the ladder moves through the career. But thanks for sharing this great analogy. Again, I think it's just always moving target, and just keep clarifying what's in for you. So that's great. All right, so I would like to touch base on capital raise. I saw you mentioned about 6 C's of raising capital. Do you mind just shedding some light on it, giving more color to the listeners? 6 C's of raising capital. What's that about, and how is that framework works?
So for anyone looking to raise capital, I call it the 6 C's of raising capital, right? And it really comes down to a framework to help you understand, 1, if you're ready to raise capital, and 2, how to get it done. So it's like kind of an assessment, but also the steps that you need to do. The first C is going to be confidence, okay? And I don't mean confidence from just faking it till you make it or blind hubris. I mean confidence that comes from putting in the reps, knowing your stuff, right? Analyzing deals, understanding the numbers, understanding what a good deal looks like. You have to have confidence. That way, when you're speaking to people, you actually know what you're talking about. So again, I'm not talking about just faking it, but know your stuff. Even if you've never done a deal before, you should put enough reps to understand what that looks like. That comes from listening to podcasts like this, reading books, articles, getting on forums, joining masterminds, getting a coach or a mentor, but really taking action and analyzing deals so you understand what a great opportunity looks like. The second C is credibility. And this relies on your own experience. But again, if you don't have a long track record in real estate, you can do two things. One is leaning on other people's experience. Again, going back to a partner, coach, mentor, other people on the team, but also your own corporate or other experiences. What have you done where you've had success? So for me, when I started going into this space, I had only done a couple of, smaller multifamily deals, but I had a lot of success in advertising and marketing, overseeing $100 million advertising campaigns, being recognized as one of the top professionals in advertising and marketing for my work on the Buick brand. So I could take some of the successes there, incredibly talk about how I was going to apply it in the business world when it comes to real estate investing in large apartment syndications. That third C is going to be connections. Who do you know? Okay. And it's key to be able to take the current relationships you have and be able to expand them. Right. So that is the thing that I think stops so many people, because maybe you don't think you have the network to raise capital. I certainly didn't. And, when I was starting out, I was like, hey, anybody I know they don't want to invest with me. And most people I know don't have the money to invest. Well, you got to stop that. That's a limiting belief. You don't know what people have, and you can always expand your network. You have to understand there are people out there who are looking to invest in deals just like the ones you're going to come across. You just have to know what to say when you come across them. All right. So those are the first three C's. The next C is going to be channel. Now we're getting more into some of the tactical aspects of it, right? But it's the channel. How are you going to reach these people? Are you going to reach these people through phone calls, text messages, email, podcasts like this? What's the channel where you're going to be connecting with these people? The fifth C is going to be the communication or the actual message. What are we saying to them? What are we highlighting? What are we going to do to show them why they should be investing? You have to have your communication. You have to understand what people are looking for. It's not always just about numbers. I think a lot of people sometimes they think through and they think raising capital for deals is just a matter of showing people the returns. Hey, you get a 20% IRR or 7% cash on cash return. That's not why people invest. They may tell you that. And you may fully think it based on everything you see, but people typically invest for emotional reasons, right? There's something going on in their life where they feel like they're not making a good decision with their money. And most of us, especially if you're the leader of your family, you want to make sure that you're setting your family up for success. And you want to have something to show for all your hard work, right? And that's where the emotional side of investing comes in. It's making sure that you're helping these people make sound investment choices for their family. Okay. So that communication is absolutely critical. And then the last C, the sixth C, it's consistency. I'm sure you've come across people who show up one day, they tell you they're doing this, and you see them 6 months later and they've done nothing, or worse, they're doing something completely different. You see them 6 months after that, they're not in the game at all. They went back to another job, or they're doing something completely different again. And those are not people you can trust with your money, because you have no idea what they're going to be doing. So consistency is key. You have to follow up in the communications. You have to keep looking at deals. You have to stay committed to what it is you say you're going to do. You can certainly change small things here and there. Maybe you decide, hey, you know what, this asset class isn't working as well. We need to shift here, or the city isn't working as well. We want to start looking over in this market. But if you are changing something every time, you're never going to get traction. So consistency is absolutely critical when you're talking to people, because they want to see that you mean what you say, you show up, you do it exactly what it is you say you're going to do. To give you one last example, right? Let's say you go to McDonald's, and the first time you go, they've got the American meals, right? The hamburgers, they've got the French fries, they've got the Sprites and the Cokes. Then you go 6 months later, now they're selling pizza. And you go 6 months after that, and now it looks more like a Chipotle, where they've got everything open. That's and you go 6 months after that, and it's an Indian restaurant. You have no idea what to expect from these people, right? You're not going to keep going there, right? Yeah. But the reason companies like McDonald's exist, whether you like the food or not, it's consistent. I go to McDonald's almost anywhere in the world, and get a very consistent burger, fries, and I get the same meal, right? That consistency is really, really important so people understand who you are, what you represent, and how you can help them reach their own financial goals. So again, 6 C's of raising capital. It's confidence, credibility, connections, channel, communication, and consistency.
Yeah, great, man. Yeah, I definitely can see that. How true is that? I think the last one is the most challenging for people. Like Ray Dalio says, you can have anything in life, but you can't have everything in life. So I think consistency is just really, really key, because that inertia, that pattern, with the more you do it, just somehow becomes easier and easier and easier and easier. You can look at so many businesses that, have been 20, 40 years. It seems like it's not a novel idea, but just you keep doing it, they're doing it more effectively, more efficiently. It's easier and easier. That inertia just keeps moving them. But it's hard to stay consistent, 100% for sure. All right, great insights. Now, I want to touch base on multifamily space. And again, we're mostly in industrial and retail, and small bay industrial predominantly. Obviously, I watch a lot of my friends in multifamily space. So tell us more about how does the family market is looking right now. I see, Chicago right now, it's kind of on fire. How much sales compared to last year increased? I'm still a little bit undercover, apartment guy. I'm breaking ground right now on 42nd Street in Bronzeville. We're building four flat duplexes. We're going to sell them as a condos, $500,000 each, probably on the 42nd. So I have confidence coming back again, and hopefully rates going to go back, but not to pre-frame with this my optimism. Like, I'm very optimistic always, right? We tend to be over too optimistic. What do you see in multifamily right now? Where do you see the biggest value opportunities if we try to confine it within your space?
Yeah. So, one, I love your optimism. I'm very optimistic as well. And the one thing I'll point out to everybody is real estate is always local. And if you say multifamily on the national level, certainly the numbers are down, and that's being driven mostly by the Sun Belt. But you also have to step back, because what happens is, we just react as humans, right? We react to the news of the day, the latest headline or whatever's going on. And we don't step back and look. The Sun Belt was on fire. Fire. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I saw 25% rent growth in Phoenix. 25% rent growth. There is no way that's sustainable. I don't know who thought it would be sustainable, right? So you have to take all of this at a high level. As investors, I would look in a longer lens than 1 year, 2 year, 12 months, 6 months. Don't worry about that. You invest for the long haul, right? You pick and choose when you sell, but you should be investing for the long haul. And if you're doing that, I think in any of those markets, you're doing fine. Certainly the Midwest has been on fire. The Northeast region has been on fire with strong rent growth. But again, if you go back a couple of years, Texas, Arizona, some of those markets were doing phenomenally well. Now they're taking a hit. And if you have a short window business plan, let's say a 2-year value add strategy, then yeah, you're probably getting clobbered right now. But if you're taking a longer view, a 5, 7, 10-year look, and maybe you've minimized kind of the risk based on your loan, based on your financial situation and financial structure, then you'll be fine. So the biggest thing I will tell investors is this: make sure the business plan matches for the opportunity, and the risk profile should also match the opportunity. If there's not a whole lot of upside, make sure you protect the downside, right? And vice versa. So you just have to invest with that lens, and I think you'll be okay. But I'm very bullish on opportunities in multifamily. A lot of people are getting out of it. We had a lot of people who rushed into it over the last 5 or 7 years. A lot of folks are now getting out and going to other asset classes. But multifamily is tried and true. It's been around for over a century. It's going to still be here. And for that reason, I'm very, very bullish on it. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for investors to get some great deals today. And we know that there's a housing shortage. There's a housing crisis, and people are always going to need a place to live. AI and technology is not taking that away. So I love that component versus maybe other asset classes or other investments. I love the tangible nature of an apartment building. It's a physical thing. There's always a way to create more value. So I love it from that standpoint. I just think we have to be probably a bit more prudent with the business plan and being realistic there.
Amazing. All right. So, with that, I would like to wrap up with our traditional thought-provoking question. Now, you have a hard pass if that question is something you don't want to answer, but I'll pull the card for you, and let's see. Okay, so that's an interesting question. I had this question for myself, I remember. So, if the money was not an issue, how would you spend your time?
Ooh, great question. If money's not an issue, how would I spend my time? I'm big on family, which you kind of alluded to. So I would spend a lot more time with family, particularly my parents. You know, I really enjoy, we typically travel, and my dad will come out and take vacations with us. So it's always good to see kind of those three generations together with my kids and my dad. So I think that's how I'd spend more of my time. Maybe retire them and spend more time just with the three generations together.
Well, this is a great answer. And I just want to kind of comment on that as well. You know, I'm from Lithuania. My dad still lives in Lithuania. I see him maybe like once a year. And this year we went to Italy with a family, and I flew him in to spend a week with him, with us, which was, probably 25 years. I haven't spent that much time. Usually I fly in there maybe a day or two. And it was just really amazing time to spend and see and connect. And you realize now, age, how many of those moments we still have. Is 5, 6, 7 like that in our lifetime, right? So that's just such a special thing to do, and that's what commercial real estate allows to do. Not many people would be able to achieve that, right? So this is great. This is amazing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for jumping on a podcast. I think it was really informative. 6 C's. I think everyone should listen to that and just write it down and plaster it. Who is trying to master capital raise and be better at it. Now let's leave our listeners where they can find you. And if they want to listen to more of your wisdom or meet you or connect with you, how do they find you?
Yeah, listen, if you like podcasts like this, we've got our show. It's called Multifamily Insights. So just check that out anywhere you listen to podcasts. But on top of that, if you are interested in apartment investing, we did put together a guide. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. So check that out. Just go to casmoncapital.com/7questions.
Amazing. Thank you, John. Really appreciate it. Thanks for getting on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Value Builder Podcast. For more strategies, stories, and episodes, head to valuebuilder.co or subscribe on your favorite app. Always make it better than you found it and keep adding value. See you in the next one.